Hello and welcome back to the WABAN podcast, the movie and TV show podcast where we have an expert discuss movies and TV shows with somebody who's just a normal guy. So that's our thing. That's our shtick. I am your host Nim, and today I'm joined by a cruel prison guard.
Why do you have to paint me as the bad guy?
I don't know. Because I feel like, you know what? Fine. Let me start over. Today I'm joined by Morgan Freeman.
I don't want to try to do an impression because I would just butcher it.
I remember the day Andy Dufresne came to the prison.
Well, yeah, because he has like that deep and low and very soothing like narrative tone, and I don't think I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's difficult to do. I do have like a lower voice than you, I think, so it helps. But it's still not right. No, I don't think anybody can perfectly capture Morgan Freeman's voice. Like it's such an iconic voice that like you just can't.
Yeah, I've heard many impressions, but doesn't quite get it right.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just there's just something about his voice, Mm-hmm. You can't top it. It's great for like voiceover, which like maybe that's why they got him for this role, because there was a lot of he does a lot of narration in his character does a lot of narration.
Perfect voice for narration,
and it's exactly the perfect voice for narration. So maybe that's part of how he got the role. I don't know. Or just because he's a great actor in general and he plays the part really well. So yeah, we watched The Shawshank Redemption, which I looked up what year it came out. I think it said it was 1994. I don't know, somewhere in the 90s it came out. But yeah, so this is the second time I've seen it. Last time was like maybe like 2 years ago or something. So it's been a little bit. But yeah, since it's your first time, any major thoughts you have?
Well, I did tell you before starting this that I didn't realize it was a prison movie. And then I finally realized that it is the prison movie, that like all of the stereotypes and everything comes from, the guy that can get things, the digging through the wall, crawling through the hole, all that junk, every little bit of it.
Yeah, I don't know if this movie created a lot of those stereotypes, but like it definitely perfected them. I really don't know. I've not watched a lot of like prison movies, but this is definitely like, if you look at the prison movies, it's probably definitely the most well liked one or well praised one.
I just noticed that all of like the prison tropes are there, and they're I've never seen them done in like this sort of realistic way. I've only ever seen them in like a weird cartoonist way.
Right, like in the episode of BoJack when Todd is in prison and stuff. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's yeah, that's the thing, is it takes it, because like the thing is, a lot of these stereotypes of like like, oh, there's there's the people who rape people in prison. There's, oh, he's the guy who can get anybody anything they want. He's the all this stuff is, a lot of those stereotypes are based in actual truth, I think.
Right.
And this movie actually shows the truth of it, the more realistic side of it. And it's actually, I don't know if you knew this, but the movie is actually based on a Stephen King book, I believe.
Oh,
so
I did not know that.
Yeah. So yeah. So what are your overall thoughts of the movie?
It's a real good movie. I have to say that first.
Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't afraid to get dark a lot of the time, and it was very dark a lot of the time. but it never got too dark. Like, it had a very good balance of it. It would bring it back to, that group of inmates just being friends and being very casual and nice to each other. And then it would pull you right back into this like dark and heavy mindset, and then pull you back again. And it never gave you too much of either.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can definitely, yeah, I can definitely see that. Yeah, it's well, it has to show you sort of the dark side of it to sort of tell the story properly, but it also can show you that there's some sort of, yeah, there is some level of positives that people, yeah, those occasional positive moments, those rare positive moments that they have, and it's interesting to see how they sort of they really do a good job at really getting into like the mindset of like an inmate and what it's actually like to be in a prison system like this,
Right.
So
There's a lot of mentions of routine,
mhm.
more routine and even more routine.
Yeah, and
So like when Morgan Freeman is finally out, when Red is finally out, he's like, for the past 40 years, I've been asking to go to the bathroom and I can't do it without asking anymore.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like those little things. Well, then there's also the whole talk about like what it means to be institutionalized, right? So there's
Right.
specifically with the one character who I Brooks was
Brooks.
that? Yeah, Brooks.
Brooks was here.
So yeah, Brooks is this old guy who's been in prison for 50 years, which I mean, think about how much time 50 years is. It's kind of
Especially in like industrial age around there. Well, I
yeah,
guess it
yeah.
was. Is that considered industrial age? Well,
Well, it took place. It takes place in like it starts in the like later 40s and ends in the 60s.
right.
It's like it starts in the 40s, ends in the 60s. It's like 20 years, pretty much, is the whole movie takes place.
Right.
And at the point where he got out of prison, I think it was closer to like the 50s era ish.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, he explained like when he was out, he saw an automobile as a boy just once. And
yeah,
now they're everywhere. And he's saying, the world got itself in a big hurry.
it's kind of this idea of like you're in for that long. It's nearly impossible to just kind of adjust to normal society.
Mm-hmm.
Like he talks about how he kept thinking of like ways to break the law so they could send him back,
Mm-hmm.
because to him that was his home at that point. That was, he was there. He was the librarian, the guy who brought everybody their books, and
The guy who took care of the one crow that he found.
yeah, yeah, he was comfortable with that, and it's suddenly, and it's interesting because at the end you kind of, when Morgan Freeman's character gets out, he's kind of the same. He kind of has almost the same thing, but not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite as severe, but it's. I mean, he's been in only 10 years shorter than that guy. 40 years is also a really long time,
Right.
and it's you kind of see almost the repeat of that. He literally had the same job and like was staying in the same place, but he kind of had that he had something different, he had something keeping him going, that
Right.
promise he made to Andy.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, like if he didn't have that, maybe he would have done the same thing Brooks did. Maybe he would have hung himself the same way. It's kind of this interesting thing, and that's actually a really sad scene when Brooks does. It's like,
Yeah.
and like as an audience member, we don't know what crime he committed to get him in prison in the first place. But
Mm-hmm.
like we don't, we see him as he is now. Now he is just kind of a nice old man, right? Like he's not a
Right.
terrible
Right.
person. Maybe he was a terrible person when he first got in, you know. you're in for 50 years. It's probably, murder or something like that. It's got to be something pretty bad. But yeah, it's it it's interesting because it's one of those things that you never like. It's always interesting to think about the whole concept of prison. I think
Yeah,
of
yeah.
like what does that do to a person? And I mean, this is definitely hands down the best movie that's ever explored that
Mm.
concept and that sort of idea in a very like realistic way that feels very real at least. Because it's
Yeah.
like,
Well, uh, Morgan Freeman's Red's little speech the final time that he's, uh, getting, what is it, evaluated if he's been rehabilitated.
mhm,
He gets into it that, like, rehabilitate is just a made up word that, it doesn't have any meaning inside the prison because the prison isn't designed to rehabilitate them. It's designed to keep them there and to, there's nothing helping them to improve themselves and to be able to
mhm,
gain the skills and experience needed to be out in society. It,
yeah,
in fact, does the exact opposite. So
mm,
it's not a prison designed for rehabilitation. It's a prison designed just to be a prison.
just to keep people there, just to
Yeah.
hold people. And it's this interesting thing where it's like if you did sort of become a better person or regret the things you did, it's not because the prison system helped you do that or they helped you learn that. It's because you just spent so much time in there that you had enough time to have self-reflection and whatever to maybe look at yourself and
Right,
maybe
right.
regret it. Like he says at the end, he says, I regret the man I was then, like I do regret the things I did. Um, but like it's not because of the prison system helping him to do that. It's sort of
Mhm.
just because he just happened, he's been in there so long. It's, he's had enough time to mature and just look back on life and um
Right. Going off on a small tangent, the to put it in vague terms and without spoiling, the plot of Persona 5 is about rehabilitation, right?
mm,
It's in this vague and odd way, but you're constantly referred to as a prisoner of fate, as if,
hmm
you're bound and chained to die.
right.
And the Velvet Room, Igor, and all those that help you through that, they're people and tools made to try to rehabilitate you to break free from that and to move past it. And
hmm
it's specifically focused on the growth of your character, the development of connections to help you past it, and all that kind of stuff.
hmm
And it's very much like the Shawshank and like the Velvet Room, which are both the prisons in this scenario, are like polar opposites of each other.
yeah,
Because one is specifically designed to give you the skills to move past it, and while other is just chaining you down.
yeah, and it's like and they do have to obviously do work in the prison to like learn how to learn how to work hard or whatever, but it's literally just they say it's like, oh, so they can learn how to work hard or whatever, but it's also just because, oh, there's jobs that need to be done, and
You're free.
it's cheaper to have prisoners do it than to pay somebody to do it.
Yeah.
That's the only reason they do. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. No, it's it's just really interesting, and also to see like this sort of treatment, like, and I'm sure there's different levels of this in the real world of like some prisons that treat their inmates more humanely than others, and there's
Mhm.
probably different levels of this, but like you get to see sort of the way they some of the guards and stuff almost view them as if they're just not people in a way. Because
Right.
like the thing is, like in the beginning there was that guy who was like crying and he was saying like I don't I'm not supposed to be here and all this stuff, and like we don't know. Maybe he was mistakenly put in there. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
he didn't commit whatever crime he was in there for. But the guards might not have known that either. But they didn't care. They were just like, no, you're in here. You're less than human. Let's like beat the crap out of you, and then like
Yeah.
to the point where he ended up dying the next day.
Mm.
The next morning or whatever. And it's kind of, and then they just kind of move on from that, and it's like, yep, oh well, he died, okay. And it's like, and as the prison guards, they're just kind of like, well, it's almost like they're animals, not human beings, kind of.
Right, right.
It's this, yeah. Um, it's kind of like this idea of like you make one mistake and you're suddenly no longer human.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's interesting to see that, and there's a certain level of it where it's like, okay, yes, you commit a terrible crime, there should be some sort of consequence, right? You commit murder, there are consequences. But there's also another level where it's like you have to sort of see the humanity underneath, and it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely things going too far, and especially going back to the idea of rehabilitation, if one mistake is all that it takes for you to be treated like that, then like what's the point at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Like if, everyone makes mistakes, so if the moment that you slip up, you just get thrown down into the gutter like that,
Mm-hmm.
and with no chance of getting back up,
Right,
like
right.
that's not okay. That's not okay in any sense.
Yeah, and you could say like, well, there's a difference between making a small mistake and then making a big mistake, like killing somebody. That's not a mistake that everybody makes mistakes. That because that's obviously a very
Right.
very
That's
different
not,
thing.
it can't be simply defined as a mistake.
Right, right. So there's definitely different levels to it, but yeah, it isn't like you do have to kind of, yeah, I don't know. It definitely raises a lot of those interesting questions and kind of shows.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
I always see online little stories about uh I forget what country it was. Maybe it was like Norway or Denmark or something like that. That their prisons are actually like really nice, and they're actually focused on rehabilitation. Like
Mm-hmm,
they have their own room that has a window, and they can get proper books and everything.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
they can actually be released instead of just cooped up in there.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to help you be ready to go back into real society and be a good contributing member of society instead of, yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah. It is interesting. And then like, yeah. And it's also interesting to see sort of the level of like, so obviously in the movie you learn that Andy is actually innocent
Mm-hmm.
of the crime, right? And there's even a point where there's actually possibly substantial enough evidence to prove that he's innocent and
Right,
that he
right.
doesn't, deserve to be there. But the warden doesn't want to act on this, and in fact does what he can to prevent
Mm-hmm.
any of that information from getting out because of the value that Andy gives to him, in doing
Yeah.
all of his.
I found that somewhat interesting because he was talking about it, and at first it just felt like the warden didn't care. Like, like it was just a hassle for him to go through that, and so he didn't. But
Mm-hmm,
then after Andy mentions that, he wouldn't tell anyone about the money laundering, it was almost like a switch flipped, and he was like, right, he could be terrible if he gets out of this prison, and so I need to do everything I can to prevent it.
yeah, it's that, and also he wants him there to continue to help him with his scams as well.
Right.
He doesn't see the humanity there again, because it's, I feel like if you were a sympathetic person, right, who cared about other people and other people's, well-being, you would go, oh my gosh, he's innocent. He could be innocent. Let's reopen this trial and look at the evidence and have them go through the evidence and stuff. But, again, he's kind of in his own little world where it's all about keeping his own money and keeping everything in service of himself, and using his job and his position of power to keep everybody down and help them support himself, and it's just, yeah. And it's interesting because there's like, you see there's like people like that in not only in places like that, but like in the real world everywhere, where it's like this idea of like, yeah, it's like not seeing the humanity underneath the other people and just kind of seeing other people as a way to push you higher.
Yeah.
And like there, and it leads to a really actually horrible moment too, where the one guy, the newer young guy, who had only been in for a year or whatever, and he only had like a year left or whatever, because he was in for like theft or whatever, like he wasn't in for murder or anything.
You're right. Got his high school diploma. Apparently, had a wife and kid.
Yeah, and he was actually planning on turning his life around, and he's going to come out in a year, and he supposedly was trying to break out, even though he literally went out there because the warden requested that he come out there and to talk to him, and it was all just a setup just to make it seem like he was trying to escape, and it just so he could shut him up. So he didn't see, again, he doesn't see that humanity there. He's like, oh, this guy, he's just a prisoner, It's this idea of like, they're worth nothing to me.
Yeah, the warden sees Andy as like a tool for his business, and then that new guy, I forget his name.
Yeah, he sees him as an obstacle.
Yeah,
as a possible obstacle because of the testimony that he could have in court or whatever, because of what he brought up. And so it's just kind of like that has always been like that scene. And like I remember watching it even this time. I remembered that happened, and like he was walking out there to meet the warden, and I was just like cringing. I was like, no, it's gonna happen. I know it's gonna happen. Because you actually start to sympathize with this guy, because you're like, yeah, he wants to turn his life around. He has a kid and like a wife, and he did all this hard work, and it's just yeah.
Seeing him go out there is just like, this isn't good, dude. Go back. Just stay in your cell.
Right.
There's no way this warden is gonna like be understanding about this.
But the problem is he has no reason to believe that the warden wouldn't be understanding. You know what I mean? Because he thinks, he's probably thinking, oh, it's his job to be, to help out the prisoners and, do what he can, whatever. That's probably his thought process. Yet, he doesn't actually care. And it becomes this whole corrupt system, The prison becomes it becomes a source for this whole just money laundering scheme, and it's like this whole corrupt system. Although I do love how Andy takes them down essentially in the end.
Oh, right. The switching out the book. I loved him opening up, seeing the Bible, reading, "You were right, salvation lies within." That he said while he was holding the book earlier in the movie. He opens it up, and there's the cutout of the rock hammer.
Yeah, the rock hammer.
His salvation literally lied within the book.
It did. And it's interesting because it's like, I remember at the beginning, and I actually forgot that was at the end. So even when I rewatched it, I was like, oh wait, yeah, because like throughout the movie, you get to that part, and you're kind of like, I'm kind of thinking like how did he like hide it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, because he, Morgan Freeman said at the beginning, he's like, if they find that, they're gonna take it from you. You know, you're not allowed to have. I'll get it for you, but if they
Right.
find, you'll have to hide it really well. And then I saw that, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Um, and it's actually kind of cool to see like all the pieces fall into place of like you see like all these details like okay, so he got Red to get him the poster, and you think,
Mm-hmm.
oh, he just wants a poster of like this woman so he can look at and be like, whatever. But the real reason he wanted it is so he could hide the hole. It could,
Yeah.
it's like you kind of see these pieces come together. You think he got the rock hammer so that he could use it to like carve those rocks, his stones. He did use it for that.
Mm-hmm.
But the main reason was, and it kind of shows like his intelligence compared to the other like inmates as well. Cause like he gets in, his automatic first thing is, I want to get a rock hammer. Like I want to start working on um, this getting out. Well, I don't know if he thought of that at first. I think it was once he like,
Yeah. It kind of showed that it was accidental. He like was carving his name into the wall, and then
hmm,
a chunk fell out, and he was like,
hmm,
"Oh, this rock is soft enough for me to do this."
yeah,
Because he's,
yeah,
his geology stuff.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That, and then he climbed through the pipe full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like
500 yards,
sewer pipe.
as much as 5 football fields. That's
Yeah.
nearly half a mile.
Yep. Yep. Um, I love that moment though, and this movie is has a lot of really good like shots in it. It's very good cinematography, right?
Oh
But
yeah.
at the that one moment where he's like standing in the rain and he's like with his hands in the air, like
Yeah.
it's like one of the most iconic shots from the movie. It's like that final, freedom kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, it's but yeah, but yeah, and then there's also all the other little details like he had talked about earlier in the movie about how like he just saw Andy walking around a lot and like he kind of had a funny way of walking or whatever. But then you realize he was like releasing the stones from his pant, like
Right.
because that's where he
Right.
was, yeah, hiding all the stones that he was digging up.
I didn't make that connection, but yeah, that's definitely it.
um, but yeah, it's kind of cool because you see all these little connections, and at the end you're like, oh, this he had this whole setup, and
Mm-hmm.
like he was talking about how they made up a person for like who had all the accounts for the money and stuff, so they couldn't
I
trace it back to
I
the
love
warden and
that.
stuff.
Yeah. He
And
made it.
it
Yeah, you can't just make up a person. Well, of course it can.
right,
As long as you know the system well enough and it's cracks, I can just he has
yeah,
a bank account, a
and
social security
right.
number.
And the thing is, you're thinking like, okay, so he created this person to help him with his scams or whatever. That's pretty clever. And then at the
Mm-hmm.
end, you realize, oh, it's extra clever because he's now using that name to, get all the money that's there and take all the money and use it to,
Right.
to use the money to hightail it out of there down to Mexico and start his new life. Um,
Under a new name too.
mhm. Yeah,
Completely new person.
yeah. I mean,
He can't even be associated with Andy anymore because he has his whole entire life with all the
yeah.
official government documents.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and he might as well start a new life if you think about it, because it's like there's nothing for him in where he lived before.
Right.
Obviously, right?
And obviously there's the
I
risk
mean,
of getting caught
right. His
if
wife
someone
is,
recognizes him.
yeah, his wife is dead. Anyone he may have been friends with, it's been 20 years. So like,
Mm-hmm.
will they even really, And again, yeah, the risk obviously of getting caught. And same with Red. Obviously, he had no reason not to let down there and see him. Um, But yeah, there's also this sort of theme throughout the movie, this theme of like of hope,
Right, right.
of using hope to keep you going, and like, and it's interesting because I think from what I know, that's like a real thing, with people in real like prison systems and stuff. Like I've heard this, I've from like things where like people were in prison, they said the one thing that keeps you going is just some level of hope of like, maybe I'll get out sometime, or maybe things will be better, just kind of, even if it's a false hope, it's still the only thing that keeps you from, going insane, from just, you know,
Right, right.
because there's those,
It's sort of a human being's like a last line of mental defense.
yeah, is, yeah. And it's interesting to see that some people have gotten to the point where they don't hope anymore. Like I think Red said to him at the one point, you shouldn't be, hope is a dangerous thing or whatever. And then like, um, but then at the end, I think he in the letter he wrote to Red to like tell him to go down to Mexico. I think it was there. He said something like, see, like, it was okay to hope, or like, you shouldn't have let go of hope. And,
Right. Or like when he's going down there, he's saying, I hope for this, I hope for that. And then just finally, I hope. Because, he hasn't done that in 40 years or however long.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, I also think yeah, it's interesting. I like how they framed the movie too. So like at the beginning of the movie, I mean, obviously it opens showing like the, Andy being
The
convicted or
trial,
whatever,
yeah.
but after that it opens with Red trying to like see if he can like get out or whatever, like, and asking, do you feel you've been rehabilitated? And he's like, I do, so like the movie opens and it's like he's been in, like, you've been in 20 years, and then later on in the movie it shows that again, like pretty much yeah, sorry, I messed that up. About halfway through the movie, I think I noticed it's him doing that again, and they're like, you've been in here
Right.
30 years, so it shows that like every 10 years he does that, kind of. And it's like,
And
you've been in,
I liked how it was the same lines, right?
yeah,
It
every time.
like he just didn't care. Like I found it interesting because that was right after the whole institutionalized thing was introduced and like really laid down, and it was brought up that Red is probably institutionalized as well. And so I saw his like repeated and rehearsed lines that he did that were the same as the first time, basically,
Yeah,
as just like him going, "This didn't work this last time. I don't really want it to work this time because I don't know
yeah.
how to function out there."
And it's interesting because you come to this realization as an audience member. You're like, wait a minute, 10 years just passed in this movie already. You're like, oh,
Right. The timeline is very fast in this movie.
right. But it's in a way that makes sense because it shows like, in 10 years, things don't change much, you know? Like you might have a better library now and, whatever, but things don't change much. It's just kind of, and it's kind of, you're like, oh, wow, 10 years passed, and I think there's even moments where like he says like to Andy, like, I can't believe I've been in here for, closer to the end, he's like, I can't even believe I've been in here for almost 40 years. And he's like, I can't believe I've been in here for almost 20, like it's just like, where does the time go, kind of. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
you can feel that in the pacing of the movie because, again, you get to that moment and you're like, wait, 10 years, and then, same thing at the end, except, obviously he doesn't give the same routine answers by the end, but yeah,
I
it's,
really liked that. His genuine answer of just yeah, I regret who I was back then. I don't regret that I'm in here. I regret the things that, the person that I was before I came in here. And, that just genuine response of his and him just going, But at this point, it doesn't matter anymore, so I don't care. So just reject me. And that
Whatever.
got him approved. That
Yeah.
genuine response.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep. Yep. Yeah. It is interesting. I like. Yeah. Um. But I'm trying to think of like some other things I want to sort of bring up. Um. I, one thing I do want to talk about too is like, so obviously at the end uh Andy sends a letter to like newspaper or whatever revealing the money laundering scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Police show up. The warden loads his gun as they're coming to his door. For a second, he points it out towards where the police are going to be breaking in,
Right.
and then he instead points at his own head and shoots himself. So, it's this interesting thing where it's like, it's almost like because he's the warden and he's been at the top of this prison system for so long,
Mm-hmm.
it's like he knows what the inmates are treated like, and he can't become one himself.
Right, right.
Like there's no way he can let himself be that low.
He has such an understanding. Like, he's probably one of the very few that actually understand what they go through besides they themselves. And he's not prepared for that, even in the slightest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And it's also probably a certain sense of pride for himself where he's like, I'm supposed to be at the top. Like, I'm better than them. I can't be pushed down to their level. Like he just can't, because he definitely has this sort of superiority
Right.
complex where he just, he's like, yep, I'm at the top. I'm better than them. I can't be put down to their level, Um, yeah, yeah. It's which you kind of feel good at the end when they get caught. You're just like, good.
Yeah,
maybe they'll
it's all turning around a little bit.
yeah. You're like, maybe they'll put somebody in charge who's not as terrible.
Hopefully.
And then like the captain of the guards like got taken away too, and the guy, actually, I don't know if you knew this, but the guy who plays the captain of the guards is actually a very popular voice actor.
Oh,
Clancy Brown. He was in, let's see, what has he been in? He's been in the Justice League as Lex Luthor, like the Justice League cartoon show.
right. His picture looks familiar.
Yeah, he's in Avatar as Long Fang.
Ah.
So that's cool. He's also Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob, but
I'm trying to look through, see if there's anything that I particularly recognize.
yeah, he's somebody in Clone Wars too. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting thing to mention.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always recognize his voice. I've always recognized that voice very well because of as a kid, like I watched the Justice League a lot, and he had a very Lex Luthor had a very distinct voice. And so, like every time I watch something with him in it, ever since then, I'm like, oh wait, that's him, Clancy Brown.
Oh, he was in Mass Effect Andromeda.
Hmm.
I've never played Andromeda. Andromeda is it's the spin-off like series of the actual Mass Effect games. Nobody likes it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, no. So yeah, Shawshank Redemption. Uh, I one thing that I think is a really cool detail is sort of these ideas of like, and I think you said earlier, there's like they have a balance of like the dark moments and the lighter, more positive moments. But like this idea of like enjoying the little things.
Right.
So
Like when he
like,
gets his friends beers and
yeah,
he doesn't even drink. And he never drank.
right.
He's
and
just
it's
enjoying it.
and not even just him, he enjoys the fact that he got that for them, and also it's the guys are just sitting up there enjoying a few beers, something simple that a normal free person would just kind of take for granted and be like, yep, I'm just enjoying some beers with my friends, whatever, but to them it's like the one of the happiest moments of their life. It's like to them it's like everything.
Yeah.
Because they're so deprived of like average normal life, things that people enjoy, that as soon as they get one little taste of something, it's like the it's just it's everything. It's sort of like this idea of like you don't know what you have until you lose it.
Right.
um you know and there's other moments like that, like the music, the one where like Andy locks himself in the warden's office and plays the music on the loudspeaker there. And like everybody, it just everybody goes crazy, everybody loves it, and it's like this and like because like you hear Morgan Freeman's narration of how like he's saying how like describing how beautiful the music was to him. you know Despite the fact that like somebody who was out in the real world with real freedom would hear that and be like, yeah, this is good music. They might enjoy it, but they wouldn't have that same level of like extreme emotional reaction to it.
Right.
Because like
it's
how
the kind of
often
thing.
how often do they listen to music?
It's the kind of thing that you go too long without something, and when you finally get it again, it's just that much better.
Yeah,
like you just kind of get used to having it, and it's not as good anymore. It kind of numbs you to it.
I mean, yeah, it's the whole idea of just taking things for granted, right? It's that's kind of, yeah, you don't know what you have until you lose it. That's the, yeah. And, it's just interesting to see that from that perspective. And it's like, even things as simple as like cigarettes, for instance, like they're betting on things. They're betting with cigarettes. Like somebody gets a few or gets another pack, it's like a big deal. It's like, ooh, I got like, even though like in the real world, if you like cigarettes, if you're addicted to cigarettes or whatever, you can just go buy as many as you want, as long as you have the money. It's like whatever. It's not like, but in this movie, they're sitting here betting with them, and like you get like a couple extra, and it's like amazing. And yeah.
The only other thing that I really want to talk about is what was the crow's name? Jake, right? I love that first scene with Brooks where Andy finds like a maggot in his food, and Brooks is like, oh, are you gonna eat that? I wasn't planning on it. And like it's this whole like weird thing of like, oh, it's like the old guy with like not all of his teeth there. He was like crazy and is gonna eat the maggots in front of him. And then he immediately opens his coat and feeds it to a little crow. It's like his name's like, Jake thanks you. It's like that was like a beautiful turnaround where it's like, I now love this character and I now love that crow.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's like at first you think he's just kind of like this really weird, gross old man. And then suddenly it's like, oh no, he's actually kind of a nice old man. You actually kind of,
and then you
like
see
that little reversal.
And then you see Jake all grown up in the library, just being a crow, a huge crow.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, the bond he has with it, because, like, so, I mean, at the beginning, he says, like, oh, I'm going to watch him until he's old enough to fly. He keeps him for significantly longer than that. But he creates this extreme bond with him to where even when he lets him go and then he leaves, he, like, wishes, he could be with him again.
Right.
So because he's there feeding the birds, and he's like, sometimes I wish Jake would show up, and it's kind of, it's almost like this, and I think that comes back to the whole idea of like what we were talking about before, the whole like the small pleasures of life, the little things, right? Like just
Mm-hmm.
taking care of a bird and then one day letting it free seems like such a small thing, but to somebody like that, where that's like literally one of the only things you have,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes, you know, your whole world, right? It becomes your whole, uh, one of your main purposes in life is to like take care of this bird. And well, when it's gone, you know, what do you have left? It's, yeah. Yeah, I don't, yeah, it's a really good movie. Do you have a lot more to say about it?
No, no, I don't think so. I think we covered it all.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, there, I mean, obviously a lot. There's a lot going on in the movie, and there's probably more we could talk about. But I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, like I feel like we covered the gist of a lot of the themes and the main the big moments and everything. Um, so yeah, it's a great movie. Like you said, it's, you know, it is the prison movie.
Yeah, it has all the classics there. The poster hiding the hole in the wall, everything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like just looking at it, I'm just it seems apparent to me. Like I don't know if it actually is, but it just seems like this is where all these tropes came from.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. It actually, in this movie they reference a book that involves somebody escaping from prison. Remember the
Right,
one
right.
scene? It's the Count of Monte Cristo. I don't know if you know anything about that story. It's like an older classic book, I think.
Hmm.
I've watched. There is a movie based on the Count of Monte Cristo, which I have seen before. Um, and like, yeah, there's a part of it where like the main character is like stuck in a prison. It's, I mean, it takes place like many years before this takes place. The Shawshank Redemption. It's like, I don't really know, maybe 1800s, 1700s, something closer to
Hmm.
that. Um, but he's like in a prison for like 10 whole years, and it's not even like a prison like this. It's like literally a prison where it's literally just him. It's like pretty much solitary confinement, and he slowly digs his way out over time or whatever.
Oh.
It's like that's part of the story, at least. That's not the whole story, but it's like,
Are you, is that, did they reference it like when they were going through the books?
yeah, yeah. And
He,
they were like, he's like, he goes, you would like that one. It's about a prison. It's about a prison escape.
and Red just goes, "Oh, we can put that under educational."
Yeah, we can put that under educational. Yep. Yep. No, that's the part. Yeah. So definitely, I mean, this movie's that has is one of those movies that sort of became like an instant classic in a way. Although,
Yeah.
looking into it, apparently it didn't make a lot of money when it first came out. It's more one of those where it's like it became super popular after the fact. Uh, just because it's so good, you know, critics I'm
Mhm.
sure praised it, and then it just kind of grew from there. Um, to where now it's like, yeah, it's pretty much. I mean, it's a classic at this point. It's, even though it's, how old is it? I guess it's almost 30 years old.
Oh,
In like a few years, it'll be a 30-year-old movie. Oh my gosh, man!
how
Uh,
time flies.
I know. It's interesting. The main actor, the one who plays Andy, I forget his name at the moment, but I don't know if I've ever seen him in anything else.
Want me to check?
Sure, why not? um, I mean, I don't think we have a lot more to say about the movie at the moment, so sure. Yeah, because obviously Morgan Freeman is, you know, everybody knows who Morgan Freeman is. He's, you know, major actor there. But he, I mean, he did really good in this movie as that character. But I don't know if
Hmm.
I've ever.
So it's Tim Robbins.
That's what his name was. Yeah.
Let's see. The Power, Castle Rock, Dark Waters, VHY. What? Here and Now, Major
I've,
Prime, The Brink. The Spoils Before Dying, A Perfect Day, Welcome to Me, The Spoils of Babylon. Yeah, there's quite a lot here.
Okay, yeah. I've heard of a few of those. Like Marjorie Prime I've heard of because I watched the play of that.
Right. Green Lantern 2011.
Oh. Who does he play in that? I'm confused.
Hammond?
I don't remember which character that was. I've seen that movie. It's not a good movie.
Yeah,
it sucks.
I remember seeing it.
I don't remember what character that was. Because I know the main character was Ryan Reynolds, but yeah, it's not a good movie.
War of the Worlds?
Nope, haven't seen it. Yeah,
I'm trying to find better known ones. Oh, he's on The Simpsons.
Huh. Interesting.
The Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me.
I love that title.
Yeah, that's great.
Because it's like a play on the James Bond title was like The Spy Who Loved Me or something like that. I think, but it's
Saturday Night Live. Top Gun.
Wait, who is he in Top? It's probably just one of the other guys. Yeah, I don't know. I've seen Top Gun like half of the movie like once, so I don't even remember. Anyways,
that's one that we should end up watching, right? Top Gun's like one that everyone knows, and
yeah, I mean it's a big '90s movie. Tom Cruise,
right?
Tom Cruise movie.
It's not Top Gun, is it? That everyone says is a Christmas movie, or is that?
No, that is that's Die Hard.
Die Hard, that's it.
That's a good movie. That's a really good movie.
Maybe one of these weeks.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so we could probably get ready to close now, I guess. We're sort of done talking about Shawshank. Yeah, I kind of figured that we wouldn't have a whole lot to say about it. Like it's a good movie, but
right. It has a few topics that we can get deep on, but there's not a ton of those topics.
Yeah, there's a certain point where you just don't have a lot. We don't have a lot more to say unless you really like analyzed everything. But for a podcast that's just kind of a conversation,
Yeah, and if you went full on analyst on me, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, that thing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like it's weird because like I think we're just so used to doing longer episodes of the podcast at this point.
Right.
Because like obviously some of them are really long. But yeah. Anyways, so yeah, thank you everyone for listening. Next week we are going to continue our discussion on BoJack Horseman. We're going to talk about season 4, which if I remember right, that's my personal favorite season, at least so far it has been. I might reevaluate that, but yeah, so continue our BoJack Horseman discussion. It's probably going to be another like 3-hour long podcast, but who knows? So yeah, that'll be next week, and the week after that, we will, as usual, we'll either watch a movie, or if I'm able to secure a guest spot by then, we'll have a guest. Not sure if I'll be able to. It depends. I'll probably try to ask a few people, but yeah, thank you for listening. You can listen to WABAN many different platforms if you'd like. I don't know where you're listening to it now, but here's all the places you could listen to it on, so you can use whichever platform works best for you. You can listen on my YouTube channel, which is called NIM TV. That's NIM TV. You can also find it on audio platforms such as Anchor, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You can listen to it on all of those. If you'd like, you should be able to just search WABAN and easily find it. There's a new episode of WABAN every single Saturday at noon Eastern Standard Time. So that's when you can expect one. Thank you all for listening. I've been Nim.
And I'm the goodest boy.
Goodbye, everyone.